Customer Service, written and presented by me, Jean Le Gui. Here's the legal stuff. So, the first thing we need to do when we meet a customer is we need to identify what sort of relationship we have with that customer. What are his needs? And what a customer needs is, he needs mainly a service. But he doesn't want just any old service. He wants a specialised service. He wants a customised service. And then on top of that customised service, he wants to know that there will be ongoing support. So that when you walk out from his premises, you just don't forget about him. He's still there, somewhere on your mind. When we look at the customer, we need to understand where the customer is in the grand scheme of things. And by the customer, I'm talking about the person who we're dealing with. Where is that person in the grand scheme of things? Now, when you look at the grand scheme of things, at the centre of the web is the boss, sitting there like some sort of 007 villain, Ernst Blofeld sort of thing. He's possibly not a villain, but anyway. Around the boss is the boss's power base. The boss cannot survive without a power base, so he has a power base around him, and these are the people that support him and keep him in place. And then around them are outsiders. When we're dealing with someone, we need to first establish whereabouts they are in this simple hierarchy. Are we dealing with the boss himself, or are we dealing with one of his power brokers? And then, when we've established who it is we're dealing with, we need to establish how they relate to us as a company. Now, here are the different levels of relationship. The best relationship we can have is that they're an ally. They actively support us. They put us forward, and they're a friend and ally, basically. The next level is a supporter. This is somebody that will go out for us, go out on a limb for us and do us some favours. Then we have a non-supporter. They don't really care. They, as far as they're concerned, we're as good as our opponents. Our opponents are as good as us. So, they're not they're non-committal. Then we have opponents. Now, opponents actively don't like us. They will try and trip us up. I'm sure you all know people who don't like you for no apparent reason. And then you have the very lowest level, the worst level, is a competitive supporter. These people not only don't like us, they prefer our competition. And they want to stab us in the back to get the competition in. When we're dealing with customers, we need to know what it is they want. Now, there are various levels behind the decisions that the customer makes. The customer has business goals, where he wants his business goals to be, or the goals of his company. He uses these to make these decisions, to make decision criteria. And when you look at the things that the customer asks you to do, you have to think, what are his decision criteria? And part of it is the business goals. Another part is that the customer is a human being. He's an individual. Except for if he owns the company himself, then he's basically working for someone as well. So he has his own personal goals, which are separate from the business goals. He wants to have his own personal growth, his own personal success, and his own personal career. He also has a family. He has outside life. He has maybe things going outside that he needs to deal with as well. We need to always try and take into consideration all of these things. The more we can find out about the customer, the more we can learn about the things that influence his decision criteria. Now, what a customer most wants is a customer wants action. He wants to know that things are happening. The most important tool that we can use is called an action plan. It's a plan. And when we create an action plan, we have to ask various questions. We ask what, how, who, and when. And we put them down, and we write them down. That's the most important thing. An action plan is a written plan. And we write it down, and in most cases, we write it down in cooperation with the customer. The customer sees the action plan, and sometimes even signs off on the action plan. And this is to tell the customer this is what we are planning to do. It might be a very simple thing, a few notes scribbled on a piece of paper, or it might be a whole formal project plan. But he wants to see a plan. If you give someone a plan, they're very happy. Now let's go through the 7 essentials to good customer service. There are 3 things a customer wants. The customer wants to be heard. Okay? So he wants to be heard. You have got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and that's because you should listen twice as much as you talk. When someone is talking, the most difficult thing in the world is to stop and listen to that person, because what we're inclined to do is spend that time thinking about the next clever thing that we're going to say. So try and listen to what that person is saying. Try and spend a little bit of time. Acknowledge what they're saying. The customer wants to be cared for, and the best way to make somebody feel that they're being cared for is to listen to them. The most common complaint is, "You're not listening to me." The next one, and this is the key to all good relationships, and it's significant eye contact. SEC, significant eye contact. Now, this is such an important subject that I'm actually going to quote from an article by Mark Manson. And Mark Manson writes that there are levels of eye contact. And he's numbered these levels from -1 to 9. Okay, now I'm going to go through each one of these in detail. Right, now what Mr. Manson says, the first level is level -1. Level -1 is intentional no eye contact. So basically, we're intentionally avoiding somebody's eye. This is what waiters do in a restaurant if they get busy and they don't want to come and serve you. So, level -1. This is beyond the lowest level of eye contact. This is when someone is not only not making eye contact with you, but they're consciously making an effort to not look at you. In terms of sexual intimacy, this is below the level. This is get away from me, creep. It doesn't occur during a normal conversation. Now be aware that there are some conditions, such as some conditions on the autism spectrum disorder, which mean that the person doesn't like to make eye contact. Having said that, we're talking about normal eye contact. So now, moving on to the next level. Level 0. Unintentional no eye contact. This means that there's no reason why you're not making eye contact. You're just not making eye contact. This could be because you're staring at something else. And that normally is the impression that you're giving. If you're not making eye contact with a person, they're thinking, whether consciously or subconsciously, that your mind is somewhere else. You're either thinking of something else or you're concentrating on something else. You're obviously not listening to them. Level 1, the glance, the unconscious glance. This is the moment when someone looks up at you and immediately looks away. It's basically when their eyes are wandering around and accidentally meet yours, and then they maybe look away in an embarrassed way. Mostly, we're not consciously aware of where our eyes are going and what our eyes are doing. And quite often they're wandering around and suddenly they'll lock with someone else, and then we can feel a little bit embarrassed by that. Level 2, this is the conscious glance. This is where we consciously look up and glance at someone, and then we may break that contact immediately and look away. We'll quite often do this if we're attracted to someone. We'll look at that person and they'll maybe at the same time look at us. That could be an embarrassing situation, and both people would then immediately look away. Bear in mind that a lot of eye contact, a lot of the rules of eye contact, if you like, are based on attraction. We're not going for attraction, we're going for friendship, if you like. We're trying to make friends with our customer. However, moving on. Level 3, the glance and a half. This is where we glance at someone, look away, and then quickly glance back, just a very quick glance back to see if they're still looking at us. That sort of thing is an incentive to start a conversation. That's like saying, I saw you, it was deliberate, I looked away and I looked back to see if you're still looking at me, because if you're still looking at me, that means you now want to start a conversation with me. Level 4 is the double glance. This is where you look at someone, you look away, and then you look back, and if they're still looking, then you may maintain that eye contact on the second time. If someone is deliberately trying to avoid your eye, then if you can't force the issue. Level 5, the gaze. This can occur unconsciously. It's when we're kind of not thinking but looking over at something. So we may be gazing at someone, but really we're not. Our mind is somewhere else. This is a risky thing because it can be misinterpreted as the creep stare. And we'll be talking about creep stares later on. Level 6, the smile. This is when we look at someone, we make eye contact, and we smile. When the brain is trying to interpret the way another person feels, what we do is we glance at that person, and then the brain says, I wonder what that person is thinking. So it imitates that person's facial expression on yourself. You imitate that person's facial expression. Your brain then looks at your face and says, that's a smile. That means I'm happy. So that must mean that they're happy. So the old wives' tale about a smile being infectious is absolutely true. Anybody that sees you smile will smile. That might only be for a microsecond they'll smile. It might be that smile, because a smile naturally releases endorphins in the brain, they might say, well, that smile's making me happy, I'll maintain that smile. Now you've got eye contact and two people smiling. These people are now friends. Okay, this is where it gets risky. Level 7. Now, this is the official name, so I'm sorry about the language, but level 7 is called the eye fuck. This is someone makes eye contact, holds it, smiles, and then never stops. They just keep staring and smiling, sometimes for minutes. It's taking the leap into interest, curiosity, in taking that from interest, curiosity into this person wants to have sex with me. It doesn't hold anything back. It's absolutely plainly saying, I would like to have sex with you. Now, that's okay in a bar, but that's to be avoided in most customer relations. That can lead into trouble. See, one way or another, that's verging on, it's trouble. Level 8 is the dreamboat. The dreamboat happens when you have fallen in love with someone. This is when you wake up in the morning staring at them with a dreamy smile, and you're drunk from looking at their face, and you look at them all the time with a dreamy look on your face. The dreamboat almost never happens before you've had sex with someone, and if it does, they're either Amish or it's a giant red flag. Usually it starts happening after a month or two into a new relationship. It doesn't normally last. And then level 9 of eye contact. The crazies. The 10th and final level of eye contact cannot be explained as much as experienced. When you've experienced the crazies, a person doesn't even have to be present to see them. They haunt you. They're everywhere and nowhere. It's the guy you wake up to by banging on your window at 3 a.m. crying that you never called him back. Or the girl who faked being pregnant because she thought it'd get you to come back to her. Or the guy who carved your name into his arm as a birthday present. They're the eyes that look at you in earnest when they say they want you to quit their job and move to Tahiti so that the two of you can be together perfectly alone forever. The crazies are delusional and usually come with a restraining order. The next important habit is to listen, to really listen. There are things that people say, and then there are the side words, the things that they don't say, but they imply. When someone says, this can be in a compliment, somebody could say something to you like, well, this time I think you did quite well. That's a good thing, they're saying you did quite well. But there's a little side message there. They said this time. Does that mean that previously they think you did crap? So there's the what they're saying, and then there's the message. Listen very, very carefully to what they're saying and try to find the message. If you just listen to what they're saying and respond to what they're saying, you're not listening. Empathy. To empathize with someone. This is where you understand how they feel. You put yourself in their position. We are naturally empathic animals. We naturally put ourselves in other people's positions, unless we're a psychopath, of course, and there are a surprising number of psychopaths in the world. But empathize with someone. Listen to them. Try and understand what they're coming from, what they're thinking, why they're saying what they're saying, and try to empathize. Even something like saying, I can understand how frustrating this must be for you. And actually, if you really do understand how frustrating it must be, that's a great thing. Create a solution. Now, there are two reasons why people will be talking to you. Reason number one, especially if they're angry or upset, is that they want to vent. They just want to vent. They're full of this anger, they're full of this upset, and they just need to get it out. If somebody is just venting, they don't want a solution. They just want to vent. When that person has finished venting, they may, or hopefully they will, get to the actual problem. If there is an actual problem, then we come up with an actual solution. To come up with the solution, we need to make our action plan. I can't emphasize this enough, the action plan. The first thing we're going to do in the action plan is come up with what is the problem. Not what is it you're complaining about, but what is the problem, the actual problem. And that's not what your solution is or what my solution is. Let's first write down the problem. And the most difficult part of this is not to write down the symptoms. The symptoms of the problem might be that the room is cold, or that the people in the room are complaining. The problem is what's causing that room to be cold, or what's causing these people to complain. It may be to do with something that you are related to, but it may be that that person is complaining not because they're unhappy with, say, the air conditioning, or they're unhappy with the lighting in the room. It may be that they're unhappy because they're in a bad relationship and it's just made them unhappy at the whole world. You need to find the problem. The only way you're going to find that problem is by listening very carefully. And then if there is a problem that we can deal with, then we come up with an action plan. There may be things that you can't deal with. You might have to say, look, I know some of this problem seems to be that person is just unhappy. I can't deal with that. But I can deal with the fact that the room is cold, because yes, the room does seem to be cold, and it does seem to be a problem with the air conditioning. So my plan will be this. I acknowledge that there's another problem, but that's not part of my duties. Follow up. If you've fixed the fault, you've fixed the problem, there is nothing better than a follow up. Phone them up the next day, or 2 days later, or a week later, and say, hi, I don't know if you remember, you called me in last week to look at your air conditioning, and we repaired it. I'm just phoning to check if it's still okay. This is a wonderful thing. Everybody loves a follow-up. It makes it look like you actually care about that person. The other wonderful thing about a follow-up is it will give you extra work. They'll say, yes, it's working fine. Thank you for calling. Yeah, it's working fine. And quite often they'll say, I tell you what, since you're on the phone, we've got a fault in another room. And you say, oh, okay, well, just drop a service report into the office and I'll come in as soon as I can. So a follow-up can often lead to extra work. Not extra work for you, extra business. Now, angry customers. There's no one simple way to deal with angry customers. When a person is angry, there are two things going on. They're full of angry feelings. Now, they're angry about a problem. A problem has arisen and it's made them angry. The problem and the anger are two separate items, and we need to deal with those two items separately. Firstly, we need to deal with the feelings. We need to deal with the anger. Until the anger is out of the way, you don't get anywhere. So we need to somehow deal with that anger. More often than not, just let them vent. Just let them vent and get it off their chest. And once they have, you can then say, okay, I acknowledge that you're angry like that. Can we just look at the problem? You're very, very angry because your air conditioning broke down. This is how we're going to deal with the air conditioning. This is an action plan I've put together to deal with the air conditioning. Okay? And hopefully, once they've got it off their chest, they've calmed down a bit, you show them an action plan, and you're up and running. You mustn't confront them. You mustn't take them on. Yes, they might be a small person, and yes, at the level of conscious thought, you're thinking, you're angry with me, you're being aggressive, how about we go outside and I beat the crap out of you? But you can't do that. You can do that, but that's your customer relationship is over with there and then. You really just have to take it. Think, I am a bigger man than you, or I'm a bigger woman than you, and I can take this. And then when it's dealt with, when it's gone, we will fix the problem, and we'll fix the problem using an action plan. You acknowledge the fact that they're angry. You acknowledge that they have a right to be angry. But you have an action plan, and you will carry out this action plan, and when the action plan is complete, you will then follow up. It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known. The end.